Hey guys, welcome back to Project Bodybuilding. Unfortunately, neither Rafael Brandao or Brett Wilkin made it to the Olympia this year. Brett had to pull out of the show due to some health issues he was dealing with, and Rafael decided he's tired of being a skinny bitch on stage and took the entire 2023 season off to grow. So we did not get to see either of these guys on stage, and that's a real bummer. Rafael was 10th in his first Olympia in 2022, and definitely would have done well this year with all the added emphasis on shape and aesthetics. And Brett always has a lot of hype behind him. He got qualified early for the 2023 Olympia and was making hella progress. But hey, we didn't get a lot of guys this year, that's just how it goes sometimes. Now, on my channel, I've decided to do some videos about these competitors that didn't show up to the Olympia this year. I've just been calling this series, Where Would So-and-So Have Placed? I know, real original. I've already done one on Ian Valliere, and we'll do a couple more in the near future. This video is going to be a little different, however. I think both of these guys would kind of end up around Ian, maybe a couple spots lower, maybe one or two spots higher, but either way, I didn't want to end up comparing Brett and Rafael to the same guys over and over again. And also, with these two athletes specifically, there was going to be a lot of difference in what we saw compared to the last times they stepped on stage. They're both under 30, I believe, and they've made so much progress just within the last year, and their update pictures reflect that. So to avoid the monotony of comparing every guy who wasn't at the Olympia to that top 10th to 7th range, and to account for the changes these guys are making in their physiques, I'll spin this video in another direction. I decided to just compare these guys to each other, sort of like a best of the rest kind of deal. We obviously can't gather too much from this comparison for reasons I've already mentioned, but we can still get an idea of who may have already been better equipped to prevail over their opponent. Plus, I really just wanted to do this video. I'm a big fan of both of these guys' physiques. So today, let's find out who would win a hypothetical matchup between Rafael Brandao and Brett Wilkin. I'll be using each guy's latest version and the official photos from the NPC News Online website. That's enough intro, so let's go ahead and jump into this video. If you guys like these types of videos, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe for more. Starting off with some top-notch production value here in the front double, unfortunately I couldn't find a shot of Brett hitting the front double at the Big Man Pro, which is the version we were using. There wasn't one from his individual routine nor a high-quality photo from the comparison round. I tried to find a picture from the 2022 Romania Pro, which was just a week prior to this event, and where Brett placed second, but I couldn't find anything there either. So I just took a screenshot from Brett's vlog about the Big Man Pro, and it was good enough quality to where I can use it. And even though the quality is not that great for Brett's photo, we can already see how similar these guys are. You'll be hearing this a lot throughout this video. This is the big reason I wanted to do this video in the first place. These guys are very, very similar. Look at this pose. The overall structures are very similar. We really don't start to see any major differences until we look at the lower bodies. But first, look at the arms. Same shape, similar level of hardness. The chest is the same. The lats are just barely bigger on Brett, but really they are so close and the same shape doesn't really matter. They sweep out similar amounts anyway, and the tapers are near identical. The midsections have a slight amount of difference. Both guys are kind of pulling a half vacuum and showcase good abs still. Rafael only has a solid 4-pack though, and the obliques down at the waist look a little chunkier than Brett's. And Brett is actually sporting a complete 6-pack. Now, like I said, in the lower body we do actually have some variety. Honestly, we have quite a big difference. Brett's quads are probably his weakest body part, but even then they aren't bad. They're just kind of narrow. Rafael though, his quads are his best body part easily, and they're so unique too. I've never seen quads like this on anyone else. His rectus femoris, the two muscles that come down between the teardrop and the quad sweep in bro science terms, is so pronounced. We've all seen good rectus femorises, but his are literally just as big as any other part of his quad. I think it's pretty cool, and just in general, all the areas of his quad are so developed, and the quads as a whole are huge. Now, since this pose is so close in the upper body, and I mean really close, the legs start to matter a lot, and they do break the tie for me. The upper bodies are basically identical, so Rafael's much better quads put him over the finish line on this one. But it's gotta be said, both of these guys are really good up top. They don't have the best arms, nor are they the biggest guys, but the aesthetics they have are off the charts. Both guys have great poses. For the front lat spread, we're also going to have to resort to some nitpicking, because we see a lot of similarities once again. The legs are still Brandao's for sure. All the same things I mentioned in the front double apply here to his legs, and Brett's legs aren't going to magically get wider. Now, the upper body details, the delts, the chest, the arms are again very similar between both guys. I think the chests are identical, but the arms and shoulders look a little more separated on Brandao, but only by a little bit. And this is probably just because his arms are held closer to his body compared to Brett. Keep in mind though, all these things are very minor details. However, I do notice a little more difference in the namesake of the pose, the lats. I think Brett's sweep out just a little bit more, but they also look a little bit thicker. But Brett's lats don't taper as low as Brandao's. Overall, with all these things being so close yet again, I just gotta go with who appeals to me more, and I actually think that's Rafael. I think his pose just looks more statuesque. To me, this is a flip of a coin. Maybe Brett does have better lats, but overall, Rafael has slightly better aesthetics, so I'm going to put him slightly ahead. On paper, the side chest should be a stronger pose for Brett. I think that we've all seen a little bit by now at least that besides the quads, Brett is beating Brandao in the muscularity department, albeit only slightly. Nonetheless, that should translate into a stronger side chest shot because that disparity in size should give Brett the edge by making him look a little thicker from the side angle. I'll concede some areas, mainly the side leg. Brett definitely couldn't compete with Rafael's quads from the front angle, but from the side, Brett showcases the more developed leg, quad, ham, glute, all of it. The arm, including the delt, looks slightly thicker on Brett as well for what it's worth. And really the pecs, the most important part of the pose, do look a little bit thicker on Brett, but Rafael blows him out of the water with detail. I think Rafael's pecs are right there in terms of thickness with Brett's, but I want to see both muscularity and detail, and Brett doesn't have the deep striations like Brandao. So while I thought Brett's slight amount of extra muscularity would help him, it turns out that it wasn't all it's cracked up to be, and Brett is missing too much detail to prevent Brandao from winning this pose. The rear double is finally a solid pose for Brett. Starting with the lower body and sounding like a broken record, the hamstrings are very similar. Brett is maybe a little bit more developed here, but again, maybe, and it would only be by a few percent. Moving up a little further though, the glutes are Brett's easily. It's no contest. Brett's got the cheese graters back there. Brandao's are boxed in, but he has nowhere near the level of detail of Brett. Going up a little bit more, the lower backs are nothing of note for either guy. Brett has a little more pronounced erectors though, so for what it's worth, I'm giving this small area to him. But the real reason Brett pulls away in this pose is the back. More specifically, the back thickness and detail. Width-wise, Brandao wins, but that'll be more important in the rear lat spread. In the rear double, we're mainly looking for density and detail. And sure, Rafael has some detail, but Brett has just so much more, making his back look 3D. Rafael's is very flat by comparison. The traps, rhomboids, teres, all those upper back muscles are much more developed and much fuller on Brett. You could probably give Rafael a small win in the delts, but Brett would easily clap back with a win in the arms. Really though, this pose was already decided. Brett with a solid win in the back finally wins a pose, and pretty decisively too. All that praise I gave to Brett in the back double immediately gets retracted when we move to the rear lat spread. I still think Brett has the thicker back over Rafael, but Brett looks so narrow now. I touched on this in the rear double. Rafael had the width there, and now that's more important, he easily clinches this pose. It's not close. Like how Brett easily won on the detail in the rear double, Rafael easily wins based on all the width he has here in this pose. Not much to say here other than that. The side try is coming down to detail yet again, but this time it's because of execution. Firstly, starting from the bottom, I think Rafael's side leg actually looks bigger here, but I will say Brett is probably still more developed. Brandao also has a little more detail in the side glute, so you can probably give the entire leg to him, all things considered with that added size, but really it's neck and neck. Moving up, I think Brett's midsection looks a little drier and more detailed, but Brandao's midsection shape is just as good as Brett's. Now the pecs are probably Brett's by a little bit. He's got a little more thickness in the chest, but this is where the execution starts to make a difference. Rafael has his shoulders tilted away from the judges more. This makes his chest look a bit smaller, but he can showcase those aesthetic elements like a small waist, all while making the tricep the focal point of the pose. Overall, Brandao's pose is tighter. His arm is right there against his lat, and there's not an inch of gap between his elbow and torso. Again, this downplays the overall thickness element from the side, but Rafael looks very streamlined. Contrast this with Brett. For one, his arm is several inches behind him, which makes for a little more of an awkward pose. And he's missing out on the extra arm girth he would have got from pushing his arm against his torso. And unfortunately, Brett isn't locking the tricep out. It really is unfortunate because I think Brett's arm as a whole is actually a few percent thicker than Brandao's. But we judge what we can see, and Brett needs to fix his execution because he's leaving both size and detail on the table. I did see a while back on IG that Brett was working to fix this pose, and it did look a lot better. But as of this video, Rafael has the better pose and better execution, which puts him ahead in the triceps and other key areas. So this one goes to him. Moving to the abs and thighs, Brett actually gets a surprising win. I was fully expecting Rafael to win this pose based on his great quads and how aesthetic he has been looking throughout this entire comparison. While Rafael still does win the quads in this pose, Brett's quads haven't looked better in this comparison. They look a lot better here when he's flexing them methodically rather than just passively like he was in the first two front shots. Brett is still losing in the quads, but it's more because Rafael's quads are so good rather than Brett's being so bad. But when we talk about the midsections, this is where Brett makes up enough ground from the quads in order to win the entire pose. I gotta be honest, I thought Brandao's abs were better. They're not bad, they're just meh. Just your standard 4-pack with a decent amount of blockiness and separation. But Brett not only has a full 6-pack with a little more chunkiness to them and deeper separation, his entire core is more developed. Even his obliques are more developed and are teeming with detail. It's also worth noting that Brett also has a twisting oblique shot. He looks absolutely insane in that pose too, and that proves he's got a more developed core from every angle. I didn't include it in this comparison because he hit something slightly different at the Big Man Pro, which is the show we're using, but if you look at other shows shows like the Romania Pro from around this time, that pose is gnarly. Anyway, he's got a more developed core from the obliques to the abs, and a couple of dangerous poses in his arsenal for the entire abs and thigh shot. Sure, he did lose the quads portion of the pose, but his quads are still respectable. More importantly, his core is so much better, and that allows him to outpace the deficit he had in the quads. So, Brett takes a surprise win in the abs and thighs. And finally, here in the most muscular, I expected Brett to have the upper hand. And yeah, that turned out to be true. There's not a huge difference, but after this entire comparison, we've seen that Brett, at least based on these points in time, was leading Rafael in terms of muscularity. Rafael is a little taller. So besides the legs, he is filling out every area a little bit less than Brett because he has more gaps to fill. Not only that, but Brett is bringing in much more detail. His abs are way better and more dug out. He's more vascular and he's got more chest and shoulder striations, while Rafael doesn't have many at all. This is really an open shut case. Brett has more muscle as of right now and more detail. This final pose is easily Brett's. Well, my final scorecard is on the screen, and I had Rafael winning 5 poses to Brett's 3. So yes, I do have Rafael winning today's comparison. I think Brandao was a little behind in muscularity, but had better legs, while Brett's were fairly weak by comparison, so that can help even out the muscularity department. Not to mention Rafael's a little bit taller, so if these guys stood side by side, Rafael would appear a little bit bigger. Then Brandao clearly has a little bit of a leg up on aesthetics. He's taller, and with his bigger legs, he cuts a bigger and better X-frame. The condition is probably about the same. I know you may look at the glutes and other areas and say there's no way Brett is the same level of condition as Brandao. Well, 2 things. 1, Brandao's lighting was rough. It was even worse than Brett's, and Brandao's photo was taken at the Olympia, where they infamously went on late at night and no one hit their peaks. And secondly, Brett is a bit more mature. So I do believe these guys are fairly close in overall condition, but take a look at how Brett trains. He trains hard and heavy, and I think that translates to deeper details and a harder look. So sure, the condition may actually be pretty close, but I would probably end up giving the edge to Brett since he's bringing more overall details. But keep in mind, Rafael still won 5 poses. But on paper, he's still losing about 2 of the 3 main categories, only winning shape out of muscularity, condition, and shape. I do think both of these guys were close, but after considering how close it was, Brandao was better at breaking ties. And I do think this is how the judges would see it too. I've said this a lot in my videos after the results of the 2023 Mr. Olympia because I think they sent us a clear message. That being, shape is more important nowadays. And as long as minimum requirements are met in conditioning and muscularity, a guy with better shape can beat guys better in the other 2 categories. That's how I see it. Brandao was close in muscularity, his condition was good, but he looks a little bit more statuesque than Brett. So as for right now, I gotta have Rafael Brandao winning this comparison. Keep in mind though, both of these guys are getting massive. Rafael just finished up his offseason and just started a prep, and Brett Wilkin is getting his health back on track and will soon get back on the horse. I fully expect these guys to eat their former physiques when they both step on stage again, and that could definitely sway the results of this comparison. Anyway, that's going to do it for today's video. If you guys like this video, be sure to hit the like button, and if you want to see more, subscribe. And if you guys are on the prowl for some high quality, great tasting supplements, then head over to risesupps.com. Then at checkout, be sure to use my code DHudson5510 for 10% off your entire order. That's DHudson5510 at risesupps.com for 10% off site-wide. With all that said, I want to thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.